Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Calvert alongside Father Joe Grimaldi. It's 2020. We're rocking, we're rolling, we're ready to go. The Father Joe podcast, proudly supported by Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln. On behalf of Father Joe Grimaldi and yours truly, Ken Calvert, happy 2020, everybody. Stress-free car shopping. That's what you get at Star Lincoln. It's their mission to be the automotive home of drivers right here in Southeast Lower Michigan. Star Lincoln provides an incredible selection of new and used vehicles, exceptional car care, customer service with a cup of coffee and a smile. Trust me and Father Joe, we're both driving that new Lincoln MKC from Star Lincoln. I absolutely love my Lincoln MKC. Star Lincoln also keeps a pristine stock of used cars, trucks, SUVs. Why not shop online at starlincoln.com? Hoot McInerney, Star Lincoln, on 12 Mile Road, just east of Telegraph in Southfield. Oh yeah, you know it's the home of the Father Joe Grimaldi Star Treatment. Okay, Father Joe, how are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Yeah? Did you want to ask how I'm doing?
Of course.
Doing fine, thank you.
I'm just a nobody. So I just want to say something else though on
Please
this.
do, yeah.
You know, we spoke about here we are in 2020, and all of a sudden we're getting these warnings that you better write out 2020 when you do your checks.
Oh,
because people can add the 19 on it, and misrepresent when the check was written and so on and so forth.
I went through, I saw that. And I was like, they said, don't just put down 20.
No.
Because they can go 2017. Have you written down
I always write 19, yes.
Really?
Yeah.
So you're one of those guys that would write down 05.
010.
Or rather 01. All right, well, whatever. So you would write down.
Yeah, but not now. I'm putting down 2020, so.
That's a very good question. Anyway, that's the hardest thing for us to learn. That is the hardest darn thing.
It'll take at least 3 weeks, okay.
Well, this past Sunday, we celebrated the Feast of the Epiphany. And Epiphany, by definition, is an aha moment. Talk to me about why the Epiphany is such an important feast day within the Catholic Church or within Christianity. Is it the Magi?
Well, the Magi, they say, yeah.
The Magi came from a great distance to present their king with gold, which is, if I'm not mistaken, kings give kings gold as a gift. Is that what occurred?
I'm sure, yes.
We always heard gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
That's right.
All right. I don't know what myrrh is, but if you care to explain it quickly, Go ahead.
Myrrh, as they call it, is an ointment that's used to anoint dead bodies, basically. And so if you want symbol in that writing, it simply refers to Jesus' death eventually for that. And then, of course, you have frankincense is used today in aromatherapy, and it's a form of healing, if you want. And we know that Jesus was not only a preacher, but a healer as well. So again, the symbolic use of the aromatherapy, the frankincense. And then you have gold, as you said yourself, is royal. It's a sign of royalty because Jesus, of course, is the King of Kings. Mm-hmm. And so these three foreigners brought him that gift. But I don't want to interrupt your question first.
No, my question was that it took them a while to travel the distance, but they followed what now a lot of people think was not necessarily a star, but rather Venus, the planet Venus, to find the nativity scene, the child Jesus.
Yes.
Okay? Why was that such a significant date in the Catholic Church?
I don't think the date is important in the Catholic Church.
Then let's call it the event.
The event, okay. Well, the event is simply this, that for some reason or other, news of this newborn king that was supposed to supersede any other king reached even that far a distance. But what makes the Epiphany such a very important feast is that it does away with any type of exclusivity, okay? So the idea that now we have a king, a God, who came for everybody, not just for the Jews. You know, if you remember in the scriptures, we see that Jesus came for the Jews, but he eventually reached out to others like the Samaritans, the Canaanites, and so on. He reached out to all of those people that were problematic and so on. So he was someone who came for everybody. Now, the idea that salvation is meant for all peoples, not just a small group, was new. And so it reached that far a distance, whatever the distance was, but not just the distance, the type of people who came. You know, we speak about the three kings. It's not necessarily true that it was three kings. It could have been many.
Orient are.
Yeah, it's I mean, that's beautiful because they gave them, names like Balthasar and so on and so forth.
Right.
But the whole thing is this, that these were foreigners, they were learned people, they were non-Jews. So these were people that were either astrologers or maybe meteorologists. And so these people came from afar to do their worshiping of this king. Now, the idea, again, is that Jesus came for the salvation of all peoples. These foreigners were of different color. They were people who were different type of persuasions as far as who they worshiped, what they worshiped, and so on. But these were all people. They represent all people. All of a sudden, we have a feast now that's open to everybody.
Mm-hmm. But we established the fact that they're non-Jews?
Correct, yes.
How do we know that?
Well, because of where they came from. At least the theologians have established that fact, that they were non-Jews. And that's what makes the Feast of the Epiphany so important, because it is, you mentioned the meaning of Epiphany. Yes, it means what you said.
Aha.
But by the same token...
An aha moment.
But literally, if you go to the scriptural meaning of it, you pull back the veil, huh? So now everything is clear. It's open. There's nothing to hide. There's no veil at all, because literally it means to pull back the veil,
right,
so that you could see clearly. So you see clearly that this child is not just human. He's partly human, partly divine. He's God who's come for all peoples, even these foreigners who come from a distant land to find him. And you were so right in saying that the star is not that important. And I think the reason is, if we concentrate on that, then we're going to make this just a little bit of a legend. Huh? But it's much more than a legend. It's very important feast. When you look at the seasons of the church, there are two major seasons. Huh? The liturgy is built on Easter and then Christmas. Those are the two. They both are seasons. They're not feast days. They're seasons. It's interesting that we concentrate on Easter Sunday, the Feast of the Resurrection, or Christmas Day, which was a date that was picked out to do away with the idea of the winter solstice, getting rid of that idea. It's not just a celebration of winter now, it's the celebration of Christ. But the 25th of December is the date that was chosen. Those are 2 days, the resurrection, and then you have the birth of Christ. But they're seasons. They're not just, for example, the stores are finished now with the sales and all of this, with the Christmas hype and all of that. Matter of fact, you don't hear much more about Christmas. You don't hear the carols in the background.
Oh, no.
None of that. The trees are in the street. As driving over here, you could see the trees. And yet, the season goes on until Sunday, when we celebrate the beginning of Christ's ministry, because he was baptized, and that's what baptism does. It kind of pushes us forth into our mission, and he was pushed forth into his mission. And so it's a season of Christmas. Within this season, we have this feast day, which is the Epiphany.
As opposed to what the Jewish our Jewish friends believe, this was the first opportunity to realize that the king had come in the form of a human.
Yes. Why? What did the Jews believe?
Whatever it is, we're all waiting for, I guess, the big surprise. No matter what religion you are, we're all waiting to find out what happens at the end.
Yeah, well, I don't know if the Jews saw that as the end. They were so much in need of organization. They were looking for a new leader. They had leaders in the past. David was one of the most popular of leaders.
Absolutely.
And so on. But they were really waiting for this leader that would free them from any persecution. And certainly they weren't thinking in terms of a spiritual leader. They were thinking in terms of someone who was a warrior,
right,
who was going to beat all of these other people that were trying to get to them. And so this is the Messiah that they were waiting for. And of course, the Messiah that they got was Jesus Christ. And it certainly affected many Jews. There's no question. There were a lot of converts that occurred at the birth of Christ. But by the same token, that was not what was generally thought of as the Messiah for the Jews. And so they saw him as a good man, someone who tried to do good. Many of them still respect him. As you know as well as I, there's a fairly large group of people called Jews for Jesus.
Right.
And so, again, he was not the Messiah they're looking for.
Right. In its simplest terms, really gifted human being, but not the guy.
Right.
Which I can understand that. That's simple in its form for me. But the Epiphany sort of established for Christians that this was the announcement that the king had arrived to the rest of the world. The nativity scene, we all celebrate Christmas, we all understand it, but the Magi sort of put a hand stamp on it saying, yep, this is the King of Kings. Does that make sense, or am I way off?
Oh, no, you're not way off at all. I'm just thinking that another word for it is that this is the universal God. Huh?
This is our universal divine God.
For all peoples.
For all people.
Not just for Jews.
And he is
so on.
He's taken on a capsule of a human being.
Correct.
It's no longer in our heads to imagine. Here he is.
Yes.
That's pretty heavy.
Oh, it is. There's no question. As I said, it requires faith. There's no question. But
and a lot of it is.
Yeah, and God, of course, operates now through Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. So that whole concept changed.
Yeah, and we went through that on our last podcast.
But for the Jews, it's still God. Huh?
Right.
And so they, in many ways, they're monotheistic, just like we are. We believe that there is one God only, and yet he comes in three different persons, and Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And so you have the Son now taking on all of the responsibility of God.
If I can ask, how did you articulate that on the Epiphany, the day of the Epiphany?
Well, it's a feast for all. It's a feast that we should all celebrate because it's universal. Mm-hmm. It doesn't exclude anybody. It's meant for blacks, whites, Hispanics, rich, poor, whatever they are. It's for all peoples. It's not just for a small group of people. When you go back to the history of the Jews, and they're our fathers in faith, as you well know, but by the same token, they had a concept of God using them as the chosen people. And so they felt that everybody else was secondary. Mm-hmm. There's a beautiful movie, I think, anyway, play, Fiddler on the Roof, which depicts this poor guy constantly fighting with God because God seems to be upsetting his whole life, and here he's devoted himself completely to God, and he has these daughters that are going to get married, and each one, there's a bit of a problem for them because they start to put in their own will as opposed to following the will of their father. And all of a sudden, it's not just Jews that they're marrying Christians, they're marrying and so on. So it's kind of interesting that the Jews at one time felt that they, and still, I think for the Orthodox Jew, you're not allowed to marry a non-Jew. Huh? Mm-hmm. The others, the conservatives and the progressives, they're allowed to marry other people, other faiths, not the Orthodox Jew. Okay, it's a very interesting point there. But this feast says we're all on equal basis, and we all have the opportunity to be saved. And so that's what's beautiful about this feast, because it's universal.
Have we done a complete research and backstory on the three?
Not that I would know all the details, but I can say this. I think I mentioned this once before. That
do we know what happened to them after?
I don't know. Okay. But the thing is, see,
I know that's impossible to,
but the purpose of it is not so much their lives. It's so much the purpose is that they came.
The purpose is the event.
The event, because
and the amount of work it took for them to get to the event,
right? And to want to be
and
there.
The fact that they had, the guiding light,
and they were different.
Yeah,
they were not the Jews.
I think that was the first time, as aging Catholics, if you will, realized a person of color. My goodness, there's an African-American male on one of the camels. We don't know really what happened to them.
Well, we don't know that there were 3. There could have been 20.
Oh, gosh.
Oh,
you just went and changed the whole story. I sounded like I'm from
no,
Minnesota.
No.
What do you mean?
Oh, no. 3 was a nice way of stating that you had royalty coming, okay? However, it was not necessarily that they were kings even. They could have been meteorologists. They could have been astrologers. They came from afar. We know that they're different. And the only reason we say 3 kings is because of the 3 different kinds of gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
Yeah.
And so they but they said, well, let's make it 3 kings.
Yeah.
What I think it does mean, though, is that foreigners came for the first time.
What is the message that we take away from the Epiphany?
It's a big message, universality of the church, that we're open to everyone because God wants everyone to be saved, not just a select few. And so that this is it just does away with any type of exclusivity. This is open to all people. Everybody has a chance to be saved. Black, white, poor, rich, whatever you want. It's for all people.
I think we may have walked away a little bit from your homily, the Epiphany. You basically took from that and presented to the parish,
right,
the people, me, those of us in the pews. This was my message, Father Joe, to you on this, the Feast of the Epiphany.
It's a happy day. It's a beautiful day because it makes us open to all people, that we are not exclusive in any way. And that's what's symbolic of the Epiphany, because the veil has been taken back. And so now this Christ came for all peoples. And you know what's interesting? In Europe, it's customary at this time, during the Epiphany season, to bless homes. And when you go through places like Bavaria and Germany and places like Spain and so on, you see the initials of the 3 kings that they, supposedly named, Balthazar and Gaspar and so on and so forth. You see the initials plus the year, so that you know that house has been blessed. So you have the blessing of the homes of that time.
No kidding.
Yes, and it's seen even today if you go to, the small villages of Bavaria and Germany, and you see them in Italy, you see them in... It's a time for the blessing of the homes.
Thank you again for your knowledge, and I look forward to... I've got a great podcast coming up for us.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I've got one. Don't move, because I'm going to keep you right there. I got a dandy coming our way. Ladies and gentlemen, we can't thank you enough for enjoying the dulcet tones of both Father Joe Grimaldi and yours truly. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe Grimaldi podcast.
I look forward to it too. Thank you. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.